Well, I think we'll start with the introduction by each of the candidates. What have you been told? 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
90 seconds.
90 seconds, okay.
90 seconds. Opening statement.
So we'll start with Deb Calvert. Introduce yourself.
Well, it's good to be home. Speaking with the first group I got involved in when I moved to Hopkins 13 years ago, the Hopkins LAC, which is the gold standard for public school advocacy. And I thank you for this opportunity to talk about public schools. I'm Deb Calvert. I'm running for Senate in District 44 to represent Minnetonka, Plymouth, and Woodland, and 5 school districts, including Hopkins. My children attended Eisenhower West Junior High and graduated from Hopkins High School. And I come from a family of educators. I'm a Suzuki violin teacher by training, and I was president of a statewide music teachers organization, and I'm on the Minnetonka Planning Commission. I've worked at Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, supporting the president and board of trustees. And before that, I was senior staff for U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar. I'm proud to have worked to elect pro-public school candidates, starting with State Senator Steve Kelly, Terry Bonoff, Maria Rood, Yvonne Seltzer, John Benson, Cheryl Joachim, and John Applebaum. And I want to continue our district's strong legacy of public school advocacy at the state legislature. Thank you.
My name is Paul Anderson. I just want a quick start and say thank you to the Hopkins LAC for coordinating this. It's a lot of candidates, a lot of logistics, and a lot of schedule supporting, so thank you for that. I grew up in Plymouth. I went to West High School where I met my wife. We now live in Plymouth and we're raising our 2 daughters who are in 5th and 7th grade. I spent a lot of time in the Hopkins Minnetonka area growing up, whether it's on ball fields or in the old, some of you may remember the old bubble, on the hockey rink. I faced my first 90-mile-per-hour fastball by Ryan Jose, who was the state player of the year back in 1990, so I'm dating myself a little bit, but I have a great affection for this area. I actually grew up many summers down at Shady Oak Beach, learning how to get the courage to jump off the high platform. I also spent a lot of time here in the Hopkins schools. I've got a tremendous amount of respect for the Hopkins schools. It seemed like about once a month, when I was district director for Congressman Ramstad, we were here for a Blue Ribbon Award, for a National School of Excellence, for a Teacher of the Month Award. You have a lot to be proud of. And so I'm running. One of the prime priorities for me is to be a champion for education, to be a champion for Hopkins schools and the other 4 school districts in Senate District 44. Thank you.
I'm Patty Meyer, and I'm running for the Minnesota House in Senate District 44. And I kind of want to start in maybe talking about education, and that's what we're here tonight for, and I thank the LLC for putting this together. I am a new candidate, new to the process, and new to some of the things that the state needs to do and the challenges that face the state. And just doing some research, you know, Article 13 of the Minnesota Constitution states that the legislature shall secure a thorough and efficient system of public schools. That's very important, and we need to see that we can get that done. And as a member of the House, I want to be part of the reforms to get things changed in this state. We have a history of doing things different here. We go back to the Democratic Senator of Ember Young, who pioneered charter schools in the 90s. There's states in the United States that have more charter schools than we do. We also have Governor Perpich, who also was a champion for open enrollment. So we've had reforms in the state. We need to continue that, and that's something that I would really like to get involved with.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Applebaum, State Representative for District 44B, which includes parts of Minnetonka, Plymouth, and Woodland. I'm a lifelong Hopkins Royal. Went to Tanglin Elementary School, Hopkins Junior High, Hopkins High School, and if there were a Hopkins University, I probably would have gone there too. Got the same amount of laughs last time. Changed it up. Anyway, very excited to be here and want to thank all of you for your interest in attending this event. Like my campaign 2 years ago, I promise you this, this upcoming election that there is no more important issue to me than education. As I mentioned, I'm a public educated person. I love Hopkins Public Schools. My wife and I are newly married. If we're fortunate enough to have children, they will attend public schools too. Not only have I ran on education, but have delivered on my promises at the legislature, always voting on more funds for public schools so that schools, not just in our district, but throughout Minnesota, have the resources they need to be successful. That's my top priority. It will always be my top priority, and I really look forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, all candidates. The LAC has prepared 2 questions for the candidates. They should have received them in advance, so they know what they're getting into. And then there's a 3rd question that is prepared by our Special Education Action Coalition. And did you all get copies of that? I don't know if that was. So it's a pop quiz. So the LAC's first question is, well, it starts off with a declaration. Adequately funding education is a concept virtually every candidate supports. Yes, and they get 2 minutes to respond. Thank you. In an era of underfunded mandates such as the world's best workforce, special education service requirements, and digital literacy directives, funding is not kept up with inflation, let alone funded the expanded requirements. What would you do differently to fully fund public education requirements in Minnesota? And we'll start with Mr. Applebaum and go backwards.
The last part, to fully fund educational requirements?
Yeah, what would you do differently to fully fund public education requirements in Minnesota?
Well, since 2003, education in this state has been woefully inadequate. And in my 2 years at the legislature, I was part of a group and actually co-authored a bill to provide $800 million of the surplus money going towards public schools. As I mentioned in the introduction, there's no more important issue to me, and I believe to the future of our state and being from this community, to our community, than strong public education system. So to me, that means ensuring that public schools, so whether it's Hopkins, Wayzata, Minnetonka, or all public schools have the resources they need to be successful. It means providing for stable funding that can be tied to inflation and not just the consumer price index, which doesn't make sense, but the, what is it called, the inflation price deflator, IDP. Anyway, we need to have a stable source of funding for our schools so they can budget properly and invest in the teachers, the support staff, and the wraparound services that are required to ensure that Minnesota has the top public educational system in the country, because that's what we as Minnesotans deserve, that's what we expect. And I fought hard to combat a Republican majority that wanted to fund just $157 million of the $2 billion surplus towards education. That would have resulted in countless layoffs, and that's not the direction we need to go. I mean, in a time of surplus, we need to invest in our youth. We need to make sure we have an educated workforce, and it all starts with public education. So it means providing the resources necessary so there aren't teacher shortages, and there aren't layoffs, and there aren't too many kids in each classroom, and there aren't a lack of counselors and other support staff. That's what we need to do, and you can be sure that I will continue to do that when reelected.
Thank you.
As you know, we have an education funding formula that is extremely complex in this state. I've been told that there may be 6 people who understand it completely, and trust me, I'm not one of them, and I do hope these 6 stay healthy, if that's what we're going to be working with. I do know that delivering special education services is very costly, and that there is a 60-40 split between the state of Minnesota and the federal government. The state has been very good at meeting its commitment. The feds have not. And it's time that we get them to do so. That won't happen overnight, but we need legislators that'll take the responsibility to be firm advocates for this funding is very, very important. And trust me, I would be on the phone with Washington asking them, where's the money? You agreed to this, we need this money. Even though there are many variables in the funding, the per pupil funding allowance, which provides a certain amount per student, is equitable. The fair way to increase the education funding is to ensure regular increases in the per pupil formula. We all point our fingers at this formula, but it's kind of like a house made out of cards. If we take one card out, it's going to collapse. And maybe we're at the point where we should let it collapse, and we should get together and come up with a fair and equitable way to fund our schools that are showing more funding and less mandates.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
So what I do differently is deploy a combination of tools to help districts effectively manage their own budgets at a district level. Prioritize the state, what the state is asking districts to do, and fix some of the problems with the state funding formulas. First, let's start with reviewing all the requirements and mandates that have been pushed on the districts. Over the past decade, the Federal Department of Education and the state legislature piled on all kinds of unfunded or unnecessary mandates. Let's review these requirements and eliminate those unnecessary or duplicative requirements. When we're looking at streamlining, you're looking at reports that are required by both the federal government and the state that are similar but not same. There's an opportunity to work to, this is a cost factor, this is an efficiency. We also have a situation where just constant mandates, including the special education cross-subsidy, which is costing the Hopkins School District millions of dollars out of its general fund budget. So I know that the special education students need the services, this is critically important, but the state needs to do better in when they're requiring mandates to fund those mandates. We can't have a situation where the state is saying, you must do this, and then not send the money. Same goes for other programs. If the state mandates things, the state should provide funding. And then with regards to the state funding formula, this is a very, as Patty mentioned, it's very convoluted. You've got a situation where you've got add-on categorical formulas. It's crazy. We got to look at these for efficiencies and look for opportunities to streamline. Let's get a handle on what the state is requiring of the public education systems. Let's eliminate inefficiencies and prioritize mandates. And let's enable districts to make decisions on how to spend their dollars.
All right, thank you. Ms. Gelder.
I agree with my colleague Paul Anderson. First, we have to deal with the unfunded mandates, and this is easier said than done. Former State Representative John Benson compiled a list of all unfunded mandates and was only able to eliminate a few because of resistance to dropping them. Second, the state legislature should promote and fund programs and initiatives that contribute to student success and unburden schools from administering those that don't. And as a violin teacher and daughter of a former special education teacher, student success to me involves development of the whole child and must include things like the arts, special education, physical education, and early childhood education. I also believe in research and science, and I like the approach that the Hopkins School District has taken with programs like early learning, which was a pilot with measurable benchmarks and only expanded when it was determined that it truly contributed to student achievement. Benchmarks for success are vitally important, but we don't want to make requirements so onerous that teachers are just filling out reports rather than teaching our kids. And finally, we should protect the budget surplus and keep the law intact that gives to the rainy day fund in order to avoid shifts, gimmicks, and cuts that hurt our schools during the leaner times.
Great, thank you. Second question, again, is related to funding. It says, in the last decade, our general education per pupil increases have lagged inflation, according to CPI. This lag has created a difference of approximately $350, or a 6% gap. what would you ensure the what would you do to ensure the legislature would correct this gap for schools to sustain their programs? And I hope that all the candidates got a copy of the graphs that went with this question that demonstrates the lag in funding compared to our funding costs or our expenses. And we'll start with Ms. Meyer on this one.
Thank you. As I stated earlier, the per pupil funding formula, I feel, is the best way to ensure fairness across the districts in funding. Education needs to be a priority in funding, and in the legislature, there is broad bipartisan consensus that it is. The state can and should do more, especially to ensure regular and consistent increases in the per pupil formula. At the same time, some of the burden will have to be borne by each district. That's not a change. It's been happening in the past. Hopkins has wisely created a Citizens Financial Advisory Committee, whose purpose is to prepare financial projections that make recommendations concerning future budget needs. This group serves as the eyes and ears of the taxpayer. I would look to this committee to clearly spell out the needs and, if necessary, to advocate a levy for an increase. At the end of the day, if the local community believes that local resources are needed, we should have the courage to advocate for those funds, and I think it's a fair way to proceed to protect the students in this district.
Thank you.
So we need to look at state education funding in total. The general education formula represents just one piece of funding for school districts. School districts receive additional funding for special education, specific programs, and categorical programs such as transportation, compensatory, and literacy programs. I support giving school districts the greatest flexibility in funding and support funding the general education funding formula. I believe school boards and districts are in a better position to determine school budgets versus the state legislature. By funding categorical funding and underfunded the general education formula, the state is determining budgets for school districts, and I believe it is best to let our local school districts make these determinations. We need to make sure the decisions we make are in the best interests of our kids. We are accountable for results and outcomes. Our ultimate goal is to make sure we offer a high-quality education for all students, raise achievement, and give our kids opportunities to become productive citizens. Education spending has continued to increase, but the basic formula has only had modest increase over the past 5 years. Funds that otherwise would have gone to the basic formula have been diverted instead to other categoricals or to new programs. What I would do is make sure the formula is the first place that new education funds go before putting funds into categoricals or into new programs.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Calvert.
So when we talk about inflation as it relates to public schools, I agree that the better measure than the Consumer Price Index or CPI is the implicit price deflator, because schools have mostly service personnel costs, whereas CPI measures a basket of goods and doesn't reflect school operating expenses. But I understand why school districts desire automatic inflators. I also think there are problems. Automatic inflators don't protect costs. The stakeholders need to have skin in the game so taxpayers get the biggest bang for their buck. And just like families need flexibility in their budget, automatic budget increases could put the state at a disadvantage during lean times when they have to balance the priorities of the entire state. And that being said, investment in our schools is an investment in our children that saves us money in the long run. Early childhood and family education, especially dollars that are targeted for children most at risk for falling behind, is the most cost-effective way to close the achievement gap and gives us a 16% inflation-adjusted return on investment. And most people don't know this, but actuaries use reading readiness as a way to determine how many prison beds we fund. So we do need to invest in our schools. Rather than automatic inflators, I would be more inclined to give schools money on the per pupil formula, which gives school districts more flexibility in their budgeting process.
Thank you. Mr. Applebaum.
So I touched on it last time, but I may have bungled the acronym. But the implicit price deflator, as Deb so articulately stated, is the proper measure in which to base our funding when it comes to education. You know, another thing about the last question, I hope everyone knows where I stand when it comes to this, is that we can't have these unfunded mandates that put school districts behind the 8 ball when it comes to doing all the things that they need to do to get their classrooms and their kids ready to learn. So when the federal government does things like fund special education at a level of 12.7% when they are required to fund it at 40%, it puts everyone in a much worse position. So that was going back to the last answer. But as far as a more stable funding source, of course we have to adjust it for inflation. Things are getting much more expensive, and despite what you may have heard up here to the contrary, investments in our schools, when adjusted for inflation, has gone down in the past 10 years, and that's completely unacceptable. We have to do more for our schools, we have to do more for our teachers, and we have to create an environment where more and more people want to become teachers, want to become counselors, want to become support staff, so that our kids, which Deb mentioned has the highest return of our investment, are in an even better position to be successful and want to be a part of our great state, want to continue to live here and work here and start families here. We have to invest in our schools, and we can always do a better job, but I assure you that under my leadership, that's going to be my #1 priority, and make sure that we keep things moving in the right direction.
Thank you. 2016 candidate forum is co-sponsored by the Special Education Advisory Committee, SEAC. The SEAC group members crafted a question to ask the legislative candidates. Of course, refers to special education. From your experience, what do students receiving special education services add to our community? And what have you done to advocate for them up to this point? And we'll start with Mr. Anderson.
Well, it's incredibly important. We've seen a growth in this area over the years, but I've got a nephew who has autism and went through the Robbinsdale School District. You see the type of services that are provided, and it's exceptional. We've got great, tremendous staff and teachers in this area in our Senate district. My mother-in-law just retired after over 25 years as a para, and I look at this as what was the ending? It was how did it contribute?
Yeah, what have you done to advocate for them?
On advocating. I mean, again, this is personal. This is a family situation where you see the contribution and the lifestyle that is encouraging and in the workforce and performing beautifully. And so I will continue to be an advocate for this.
Ms. Keller.
Well, my mother was a special education teacher growing up. My daughter is an inclusion specialist and has been since she was 15. She's now 24. And so special education is something very personal to me as well. And what do children receiving special ed services contribute to the community? Special ed makes every child that receives it more self-sufficient. Every dollar that we spend on children receiving special education funds, just like children that are at risk for failing, become more self-sufficient and are able to better take care of themselves, receive fewer services as they age, saving taxpayer dollars, and contribute to the economy in the workforce if they're able, and do all the things that people love to do. My son has a friend that was on the cross-country team with him that just ran his second marathon and works 2 jobs. So it's pretty incredible. And so what would I do? I think that we need to go to bat, and I have been on the LAC going to bat for special education funding since 2003. We have to I would be happy to communicate with people that I feel comfortable communicating with in the federal government, having worked for Senator Klobuchar, to encourage them to contribute their 40% share of special education funding. And I think we do need to increase funding at the state level as well. I know that the LAC is advocating reducing by half the 45% burden of special education funding that the Hopkins School District faces, and I think we do need to start meeting our obligation at a more significant level.
Thank you.
So, I grew up in the Hopkins school system, and whether it was kindergarten or my senior year of high school, classes had students of all shapes, sizes, and abilities, and it made for a much richer environment and reflected the real world. Special education plays a critical role, not just in our public schools, but in our legislature and our society in general. I know it's almost 2 times more expensive to educate a special education student than it is a non-special educated student. So again, we just have to provide stable funds. It's not enough that the federal government falls short, but we have to, as a legislature, reduce the burden that is placed on local school districts to do their job, because when the federal government falls short, ultimately the state doesn't do what it has to do, and the burden gets placed on Hopkins Public Schools or others to kind of pick up the pieces, and as a result, everybody struggles. We need to fully fund education, fully fund special education, adjust it for inflation, and keep an ongoing dialogue, because as you've heard from almost everyone, the formula for funding education is incredibly difficult to grasp, and you guys are the experts, so our job as elected officials is to work with you, keep close contacts with the principals, the superintendents, the school board members, the teachers, and figure out what should we be doing better and what should we change. And I've done that in the past 2 years. I'll continue doing that, and this won't be the last time, but this is the most important issue to me, is making sure our public schools are funded in a manner that everyone has a chance to be successful. So you can count on my continued leadership in that.
Thank you. Ms. Meyer.
Thank you. First of all, children with special needs are special children, and we all need to do what we can to help those children achieve the most that they can out of their life. I think a lot of people on this panel here have mentioned some things that I agree with. And I have to say too that thank goodness for special education teachers and the people that work with them, their patience, their skill, their knowledge. And I think we need to continue to look for teachers that will go into that field, because we need them. I think when a child with special needs and through special education learns how to do something, they can be very productive. I had a dear friend who, I had one friend, she's a teacher in special ed in St. Paul district, and I have another friend who has a daughter that has some needs, and her daughter is just so proud that she's working in the laundry and she's making money, and she feels like she's contributing, and her parents feel just wonderful that her daughter came along and got to that point that she could be somewhat self-sufficient. So we can't ignore these children, and they're all special, and we have to make sure we have money to take care of them.
Thank you. You answered that. Has everyone turned in the question that they, we got one more over there to, over here. So I'll start with the questions from the audience, and we'll start with Ms. Calvert on this one. Minnesota is known for its incredibly large achievement gap. How do you plan on closing the gap?
So, one of the best, well, as I said before, the best way to close the achievement gap is to invest in early childhood and family education. Make sure that we're scooping children up and their families, even as early as prenatal, making sure that families that mothers are receiving prenatal care so that the babies are born with healthy brain development, that children are receiving nutrition that they need for healthy physical and brain development through their toddler years. And we have to fund early childhood and family education, to me, in a way that targets dollars to families and children that are most at risk for falling behind. Because once a child falls behind, it's very hard for them to catch up, and they need to be ready for school, ready to learn when they come with the social skills and the academic skills they need to succeed starting in kindergarten. It's just the only way. We know that educating, early childhood education, they believe, there have been studies that believe that it raises the GDP by 0.5 percentage point because they become such productive citizens, earning higher wages and so forth because they're more successful academically. So to me, the best way to close the achievement gap is targeted dollars, scholarships for children most at risk of failing.
I agree with Deb. The Hopkins Public Schools has a phenomenal Ready for K program that should be replicated and serve as a model throughout Minnesota in how to properly invest and educate at-risk youth. You know, just this morning I was able to attend a pre-K, private pre-K facility in the district, and I won't name names, but they were saying that on average they believe that it costs approximately $18,000 a year for families to send their child to preschool in our area, and that is way too high. So we have to focus on reaching those who can't afford it. I mean, I don't see any argument against one that suggests getting to at-risk 3- and 4-year-olds, getting them ready for kindergarten, acclimating them with other students, making sure they know how to cooperate, hold a pencil, pay attention, be respectful, and work as a group together is going to pay dividends and ultimately save us so much money down the road that there really are no better investments we can make. So closing the opportunity and achievement gap starts at the earliest level, and you have my word that I am fully committed to doing whatever it takes to ensure that all 3- and 4-year-olds have an opportunity to be educated, will be on a path to be ready and fully on board with learning at our great public schools that we have right here in Minnesota.
Thank you.
Closing the achievement gap, that's a very big task, but it has to be tackled. And I think when we talk about some of the situations that cause it, sometimes it is the lack of the family as a unit. Sometimes children are fearful of their environment, sometimes they're sick, they're hungry, they don't have a place to go to, they may be living out of a car. So there's lots of things that can lead to this. But I think the early childhood is great, but we can't write off a whole generation that we've got in the system right now. We have to do something to help the people that are in the 3rd grade now, to make them be able to go to the 6th grade, the 8th grade, and continue on and want to graduate from school and want to do better with their lives. And maybe we need to find things for these kids that they're interested in. Maybe there's a better way to educate these kids, to close that gap. Find something that they care about. Maybe they want to do work from home. Maybe they want to do something that's in line with a trade. There's something more that we can do. We can't just write off a generation right now. We can start, yes, and help them, but we've got to handle this problem now. And I think we can come up with solutions. We need to reform the way we think about things. And maybe the kids that are having a hard time, maybe they're the ones that we put in some sort of charter schools and work harder with them.
Well, Minnesota schools generally perform outstanding on the surface, and Senate District 44 is the gold standard, when it comes to that. But when you do peel back and look at the in-depth, we've got a serious problem, and this has been going on for decades. This is not something that's just raised its head just recently. So it's something that we do have to focus a lot of attention. But for me, I agree with Deb on this. We have to focus scholarship dollars, in my mind, potentially a public-private opportunity where you're looking at low-income and disadvantaged youth that can get the opportunity and can get the high-quality programs that they need to succeed going into and being prepared for kindergarten. If you get into the kindergarten readiness, and then you get into being able to read, proficient reading by the end of third grade. Literacy is key here. Math proficiency by 8th grade, and college and career readiness by the time they finish high school. This is the solution. It's not easy. This is something that we're going to have to put a lot of effort into, but it starts with focusing on those that have the greatest need.
Here's another question from the audience. And, this one doesn't necessarily involve education. In case you're going
Very timely.
Some of you have already touched on this, but what is your professional background, and how will this help you as a legislator? We'll start with this one.
I am a lawyer by profession. I practice real estate law at a firm in our community. I don't go to trial, I do transactional work, so I help small businesses and entrepreneurs and developers either start projects, get their ideas off the ground and into reality, or I help people buy and sell buildings, help them with any and all things real estate, and how I believe that it prepares me to deal with legislative issues is that I understand how the law is applied and enforced in private practice, and as a legislator the last 2 years I understand how the law is created and have done a lot in the educational world to create laws that I believe will benefit Minnesotans for generations to come, like the first in the nation student loan debt tax credit that I created and was passed by both the House and the Senate this past biennium. Everyone here knows that the cost of higher education have skyrocketed out of control, and I researched what other states had been doing about it. I wasn't satisfied, so I studied really hard and worked with some people much smarter than me to create a program that would help all students and families in Minnesota be able to afford to invest in themselves and continue their education, and hopefully one day they'll grow up and realize they are smart enough to know not to be in the legislature, because this is it's a tough line of work, but I'm honored to do it, and I believe my experience as a lawyer and I suppose as a politician these past 2 years have taught me enough about the law to continue to create, enforce, and apply it in a way that will best benefit our community.
I am in the industry that the world revolves around, which is basically the insurance industry. You can't do much without insurance today. And I've been in that industry working on individual accounts, corporate accounts, small business accounts, and I have worked for local firms, national firms, and international firms in the area. What the job in the insurance industry, that I can take the skills from that industry and apply it to my political career, is that part of the industry is you have to identify risk, and you have to make assessments on what needs to get done and how you're going to transfer risk and handle things, and you have to solve some problems, and you have to put together a plan, because you are protecting people's assets and you're also helping businesses conduct their business and make their profits. So there's a lot of skills involved there, plus dealing with business owners and businesses. I've learned about some of their concerns and some of their issues that I can take with me to St. Paul. And also, as part of the insurance industry, is that you have to build trust with people, and you have to work with people. And I've had clients for over 25 years, and we have a wonderful relationship because I know their account, I do the best job I can for them, and they trust my judgment and my recommendations. So I think I have some skills that I can transfer.
Well, I have executive experience in pretty much every field. I've been in government, I've been in business, and I've been in the nonprofit sector. I grew up in a small business, a family business, and I spent time in that. So what I learned there is fiscal discipline, customer service, is work ethic, and caring for your community and your customers, and being responsive to their needs. After our family business, I spent time, I was with Congressman Jim Ramstad as his district director for over 5 years. I spent the full 2 terms with Governor Pawlenty. I was his deputy chief of staff. And then after that, I ran a national nonprofit called Teed Up for the Troops, which raises about $2 million a year for wounded veterans and their family. After that, I was the director of business development for a company in Palo Alto. I traveled from here, so I have tech experience. And then about 1.5 years ago, I started my own business, which is a strategic consulting. And through all that, I've got a long history of working with diverse groups, always being a bridge builder, somebody who builds partnerships, but is also working always towards success. And so that's my reputation over 25 years in business and in my career, in both in my personal life and serving the community. And I believe that all that experience, both government and business and in nonprofit sector, fits perfectly in what we're trying to do at the state legislature.
Thank you. Ms. Gallagher.
So I followed my husband's career in emergency management and wildland firefighting all over the country, and I had to be resourceful. So I became a violin teacher in rural Indiana, rural Michigan, and here. And in Michigan, my students had to pay me in eggs. They were they were very underprivileged children, and so I co-founded a nonprofit with my music partner. And we wrote grants to make sure that the kids in that community had access to music enrichment. I moved here, and I was still a violin teacher, and through Twisted Fate, I was paid staff on several statewide campaigns where I learned about so many issues, customer service, and our state and the needs of our people. And one of the people that I worked for was Senator Steve Kelly, who was chair of the Senate Education Committee at the time. I also, through my work ethic, which is extremely strong, I ended up working as Senator Klobuchar's state scheduler, where I saw public service in action at the highest level, best customer service, most responsiveness, work ethic beyond compare from the senator and her staff. And then I worked as the executive assistant to the president, dean, and board of trustees, where I saw nonpartisan cooperation, deal with very difficult problems in higher education with student debt load, lower enrollment, tuition deficits, and how to wrap our minds around that. So, and I'm a very mission-oriented, very people-centered person, so I just feel like I'm bringing a whole wealth of life experience coming from all over the country, working with many different leaders, learning communication. So that's what I'll bring as an effective legislator.
All right, thank you. So we'll start with Ms. Meyer on this one. Would you send your children, or do you send your children to public schools? No.
I have a name. Thank you. To answer that question, yes, I would send children to public schools. I personally, growing up a long time ago in Syracuse, New York, went through the public school system there. And my husband had 2 children, and both of them went through the public school system. I have been a supporter, I'm in the Wayzata School District, and I have been a supporter of the Wayzata schools, and even with some of our big levies and things, building the beautiful school that they have, I've supported that because I believe in education, and this may sound a little selfish, but as you get older, you want to make sure that you've got doctors, attorneys, lawyers, plumbers, everybody that is smart and has had a good education. So definitely, I think the public school system.
My 2 daughters have gone to Heritage Christian Academy for elementary school, K through 5. I've got a daughter in 7th grade at Wayzata West Middle School, and my daughter who's in 5th grade will be going to Wayzata West next year. So I'm a product of the public schools. We moved into our house so the girls could go to Wayzata schools when they in 6th grade.
I'm a product of public schools. My children went to Hopkins Public Schools and graduated from Hopkins Public Schools. And yes, I'm a huge fan of our public education system.
And we know you.
You can say it again.
That's right. I am a lifelong Hopkins Royal that I'm proud to be, and this is my favorite event to do because I see so many familiar faces that I grew up with, that were teachers of mine, or parents, friends in the Hopkins public school community, and frankly, that's what makes our community such a desirable place to live. It's the Hopkins Public Schools, Wayzata Public Schools, Minnetonka. That's why people want to live in the western suburbs. It's because we have phenomenal public schools. And again, if my wife and I are fortunate enough to have children, that's where they'll be going to. Our public schools that have produced a very smart lawyer like me that has been brought up to represent my hometown community. So I am a huge champion for public schools and will always be supporting our public educational system.
We'll start with Mr. Anderson on this. Would you support private school vouchers? Please explain.
Well, I would support choice. This is not something that's going to be accepted by this current administration. What I do advocate for, and again going back to the early childhood, is choice or tax credits for those low-income families or disadvantaged that truly have no other choice. We don't have that situation here in Hopkins or in Wayzata or in Armstrong or in this immediate Senate district, but there are schools that are struggling to truly help those students that need it most. And so for me, I do believe we need to look at opportunities, whether it's tax credits or other opportunities, so those kids can get to the schools that will help them succeed long term.
I would not support vouchers for private schools. Private schools have no requirements for testing or teacher licensure. They don't have to accept all students, but they'd be more than happy to accept our hard-earned tax dollars at private institution. And public schools, studies show, do a better job than private schools at educating all students, not just at-risk students. And as far as choice or tax credits, asking families who are already struggling to pay bills to pay for private schools to get a $2,000 tax credit at the end later is not really a useful choice for many of those families, no matter how well-intentioned.
I would not support private school vouchers because I believe that the existence of them leads to the weakening of our public school system, and I cannot support something that I believe weakens a fundamental part of our community, of our government's purpose, and of our state. So no, I cannot support that.
Ms. Meyer?
Well, I support school choice if a family wants to make that decision. And I think it's up to the family, the parents, to have the discussion that where they want the children to go to school. I support the scholarship program for the early learning to start the kids out with pre-K. I'm not in favor of doing it within the school system. I'd rather see it at the places like you went to today and other companies that deal in early childhood education. And I support a scholarship for them. And I support, I'm kind of an advocate. I've been doing some reading on the charter schools. And I kind of would like to see more of an emphasis on getting more children into that kind of environment.
Ms. Calvert, should personnel employed by schools have the option to carry a firearm?
That would be a no. To me, that is, I think, first of all, that teachers and school support staff have enough on their plate without worrying who in the building is carrying a firearm. And I think we have our school police personnel to take care of any kind of violent incident if necessary. And I just think it's an extremely dangerous and very stressful road to go down. So no, I don't support firearms in the schools, except for the police officer that is assigned to the school.
Mr. Adler?
I cannot support firearms being in public schools. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. One, aside from our phenomenal public schools, among other reasons that people enjoy living in our community is that it's generally a very safe place to live, work, and raise a family. I don't see how access or the availability of more firearms does anything but present an opportunity for more danger and horrible things to happen. And you can't turn on the news today without seeing an incident seemingly every single day. So to have guns available in our public schools is preposterous, and I would never support anything that would allow that to happen.
That's a tough question. We're coming off of the weekend and what happened up in St. Cloud, and somebody was there with a gun that helped perhaps save some people with their action. I look at the police officers that do work in the schools. That's one person. You look at some of these schools that are quite large. I think I'm concerned with the schools and the school safety. I think I would like to see and learn more about what the schools do to protect the students. What is the procedure for, lockdown in the school, or when the kids get in, how can people get in and who checks them? A little more research on it to see if the kids are truly safe in the school. The guns are dangerous if they get in the wrong person's hands, but I don't know, somebody with a gun may be able to save a classroom of children too. So I need to do a little more research on school safety.
Well, this is one of the, and I know all of us have been out door knocking quite a bit over the last few months. Security and safety in schools or in our society is a big issue right now, and you did see it in St. Cloud. I had a couple experiences during Governor Plenty's administrations to visit post-school shootings. One was at Red Lake Nation. And the security guard was actually shot by the individual that caused the deaths. This is a tough topic. I think it has to be a local decision. I don't think this is something that's a one-size-fits-all, but I think it's a discussion that we're in a different time right now. And I don't want more guns in the schools, but I think that conversation has to be had.
We'll start with Mr. Applebaum here. Candidates often talk about compromise while campaigning. Can you tell us one issue you would break with your party on?
Well, I have broken with my party on many of the economic issues, too often, and I feel inaccurately Democrats are pegged as people who just want to keep raising taxes and spending money, and that's growing up in this community my entire life, spending time knocking on doors and meeting with tens of thousands of people and representing everyone for the past 2 years. I know that's not what people in our community want. We've worked very hard for the tax dollars that we contribute in our community and everywhere. So I have repeatedly voted against raising taxes, especially when it comes to families, seniors, veterans, small businesses, entrepreneurs, and the people that we really need to invest in to get ahead and are really having a harder time than they should be already. So there is no need for us to make life more difficult for them, and I will continue to differentiate from my party when it comes to any sort of proposal or legislation that calls for making financial burdens more difficult for regular people.
Thank you. On that question, I think what I would be doing in facing my party would be, what does my district say? What does my district need? What are the concerns of the people in the district that I've been elected to represent? And as a result of how the district feels, there may be situations where I am going to have to go against my party because I promised to do what's best for the district. There's also situations where I feel strongly about eliminating tax on Social Security in Minnesota. We're one of the 6 states, I think, that still tax it. I know the Republican Party would also like to see that, but the reality of it is there's like $700 million, I think, that would have to be made up if you stop taxing Social Security. So that could have a little conflict there. I think we have to do what's right to keep people here in Minnesota and take care of our seniors too. So I need to know and learn more and more about the district and do what I can to take care of my district.
I agree with Patty. I was mentored by Congressman Jim Ramstad, who was a very popular U.S. Congressman for this area for 18 years and 10 years in the state Senate seat. Somebody who represented his district and was rewarded time and time again with some of the most votes in the whole country. So it's a matter of representing the district before politics. And so there are going to be issues from education to different areas. Certainly have my principles, but in the end, the district comes first. The school districts come first. So the conversation, the doors will always be open. This is not a situation that I am a person that loves engagement, loves partnerships, loves relationships, that you continue to build that trust and you have those conversations that when you have to step out and vote against your party, you do.
Well, I believe in bipartisan cooperation to the point where I actually have a Republican co-chair who is sitting in the room of my campaign. And I also have a Democratic campaign co-chair who is dedicated to public education. So, and I actually am running because I truly believe that we have to put people and good policy in front of the political point scoring that's been so detrimental to getting anything done in the state legislature. And I do think that that one of the things that I want to do is to just keep looking for common ground. Everybody faces the same issues. We have sometimes very different ways of approaching the problem. Sometimes they're not so different. And I watched Senator Klobuchar over and over and over cooperate on legislation that was very important to her district, on med tech legislation and healthcare legislation in general. And so I know that it can be done. And I too, without violating my core values, I will never compromise on civil rights. I will never compromise on human rights. I will compromise pretty much everything else after that. is something that we can talk about and hopefully find common ground on. And so that would be my approach.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Meyer, we'll start with you. Do you believe there's a place for intelligent design in the classroom?
Well, I've been waiting for that one. I did a little research on the last debate, and I noticed that question came up. And I did a little research on it, and I may be looking at the wrong sites on Google, but I believe in God and the creation theory, but I also believe in science. And if the project is to learn more about nature and what's been created and what goes into the molecules within something, I think that's great. That's expanding a person's mind. If I go down that road with it.
I don't certainly expect the school districts to teach intelligent design. I think this is if it comes down to it, it's a local decision, but I don't expect the school district to teach this.
I believe in the separation of church and state, and I also believe in science, and I also am a person of faith, and I do not support teaching intelligent design in the classroom. I think that's something that would be taught in a parochial school or in Sunday school, and I believe that science should be taught in our schools.
I do not believe that intelligent design should be taught in our public school system, period.
Here's one that is kind of near and dear to my heart. Every other taxing authority and district in Minnesota, there's about 60 different types, has the ability to increase levy rates without voter approval. That includes towns, counties, watershed districts, park districts, mosquito control commissions, sports facilities commissions, and so forth. Do you support allowing locally elected school boards to renew an existing operating levy at the same rate and duration without a public vote? And we'll start with Mr. Anderson.
I know this is an issue that school districts would like to have, but in my core principles, the voters have to have a choice. And when they have transparency on referendums, they have to have the ability to then renew them. So I oppose school districts having that ability.
So I actually am in support of it, and I did some reading on it, and in 2013, 28 of 29 referenda renewals passed. That was 97% passage rate, and I think in 2015, 100% of renewals passed. So this is for renewals. This is not for new referenda. This is for renewals. And renewals cost a lot of money to administer an election, and it saves school districts a lot of money, and it saves the city a lot of money on the actual election. So because I do believe in transparency, and I think that for new referenda, that would be really important. I do also think, though, that there are some caveats with that, that it should be no longer than 5 years, and that the board has to authorize, have a written authorization for the renewal after a board meeting with public input. So I think that there are ways of doing this to make sure that the school board knows exactly what they're authorizing, and to make sure that the public has full disclosure and can provide feedback on their feelings about the referendum.
So I believe that these renewals should be allowed without a referendum for some of the reasons you've heard Deb articulate. Approximately 99% of all issues such as these get passed. You know, we talked about public school system obviously a lot tonight and how we need more resources. Well, every single time that our renewal for a levy comes up, it costs anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 for the city of Minnetonka to administer an election. Then it costs the school boards another $10,000 to $20,000 to lobby and get their message out that, hey, this is something that you voted for before and that the schools are expecting that we need in order to deliver the type of services that you expect us to deliver to our students. So it's an inefficiency in the law right now that does not provide school boards with this authority, and every other group seemingly has this ability, so I think we should take a common sense approach and fix this.
I think voters should always have a say when it comes to spending tax dollars. And I think the question is too, when they have to go back and renew one of these, maybe people need to ask some questions and say, what did we accomplish, why do we need it, where are we going, what are the dollars involved, and I think they need to be educated, and the people in the community need to be the ones that are gonna make the decisions.
I've got two more questions here. So, Minnesota used to have something called the grad test, which was a final test that seniors took in order to graduate with a diploma. And it didn't matter, what their GPA was up to that point or anything. And it was a required test. Would you support a high stakes final test like the grad test as a condition for graduation? Who started?
Is it my turn?
I think it's yours.
So I actually think that those snapshot high-pressure tests are counterproductive personally. I work in an institution of higher learning, law school, where traditionally you did always have those high-stake tests at the end of a semester or the end of the year, and everything rode on that. And at Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, we've changed that so that there are evaluations throughout the semester to make sure that students are on track and that they're understanding the material, which I think is a better way to monitor student success. And I'm fortunate to be a great test taker. My children are both great test takers, but other children do better if they just have evaluations throughout their school career and throughout the semester. And I think it's a much better way of monitoring success and ensuring success and making sure that we are that we are graduating children that have a full grasp of the material. So I think there are plenty of testing opportunities throughout the year and with other kinds of standardized tests that would be able to help us determine if a student is ready to graduate.
I agree with Deb that I cannot support a high-pressure, one-size-fits-all type of graduation test that every single student has to take in order to move on to the next level. She mentioned her work at Mitchell Hamlin. I attended law school, and in all of my classes, 100% of our grades were based upon our final exam. And I can tell you as a student, it was not very fun. It created for an especially tense atmosphere and very stressful, and didn't promote the type of culture that I think we want to promote in our public schools. And maybe, among other things, that's the reason people don't like lawyers, because that's the situation that they were educated in. But we can't replicate that in our public schools. Everyone learns differently, everyone has different needs, and it is unfair to cast a broad stroke on every single student in such a high pressure win or lose type scenario, and I won't support something like that.
Well, I think a little stress in somebody's life isn't so bad to have. I think kids need to learn that they're expected to succeed, they're expected to pass the test, they're expected to learn the material. I'm not in favor of this one big test at the end to move them on, but I think there should be testing. We used to call them finals, and you had to achieve in various grades and courses. So I think the evaluation of the students as they move along, as Deb said, I think is good. But I do think they should have an expectation that they're gonna sit down and take a test. Because as they go through their life, they're always gonna have to sit down and be faced with some sort of test, whether it's in their job or if it's at college. So I think we need to prepare them for that.
And I think we do need benchmarks. I think we need to make sure that our students are college and career ready. This is a critical situation here that we're talking about situations where students are getting into college and are having to go through remedial courses, and then there's all the things that come with that. So I do think this is something that the grad test, I think, was repealed just a few years ago, and it was replaced with ACT benchmarks, and then I think now last year the legislature passed benchmarks in the MCA. So there is a need, I believe, for benchmarks for students.
All right, and the final question here, then we'll start with Mr. Applebaum. Right now, the state legislature dictates that school districts cannot start the school year before Labor Day, except in extenuating circumstances. And the question is, do you believe that local school boards should have the authority to determine their own school calendar?
Yes. I don't see a need to dictate and micromanage every single school district start and end date from a state level. We talk a lot about local control and how important it is and how each community is different. And I think school boards should be able to make that determination, because I can assure you the communities of Hopkins Public Schools and Minnetonka and Wayzata are much different than those in the parts of Minnesota that people may not have ever been to before. I couldn't tell you the one thing about the public schools in Warren, Minnesota, and if for whatever reason those students and that community needs to start before or after Labor Day, it shouldn't be up to me, it shouldn't be up to state representatives, it should be up to the local leaders, and that's what I think they're elected to do.
Ms. Meyer?
I'm going to agree with you on this one. That's it. Short and sweet.
Well, I think the current statute is adequate. I think this is a situation where you've got a situation with Hopkins here that started early due to, I think it's spring construction. So there are circumstances that school districts do have the ability to start early, but for the most part, this is a long and heated, debated topic over the years, and I think the current statute performs well.
I know my husband is going to disagree with me on this, because he just thinks that you have to, really hold on to that summertime recreation with the kids, and but I think that is a local control issue. I'm not into dictating to schools the needs. There are different school districts that might want all-year school for a variety of reasons, depending on their school population. If that serves the needs of the students, I'm all about serving the needs of our children, and that's the most important thing. And just to go back to the previous question, I am a huge believer in benchmarks. I'm just not sure that a high-stake test is the way to go.
Well, if you have a question that wasn't answered, please feel free to talk to the candidates afterwards and buttonhole them and get their response. But let's have a round of applause for our Thanks for coming. I appreciate your attendance. We got a great turnout tonight, and we'll see you in 2 years.
Thank you.